Good morning and welcome to the Student Hub Live. Today's session is all about making the most of your Access module. And my name's Karen Foley and I present the Student Hub Live, but I'm also the chair of YO32, which is one of the Access modules that we're going to be discussing today. And I'm super excited that you have all joined us today for this session, which is going to be a lot of fun and very informative. And I'm hoping that we've got some of our students who are on the October start and also the February start. And we've got students from all three modules here today. So this is a really wonderful space where we're going to fill you in on some stuff that we think is really important for you to know, irrespective of whether you're starting out or nearing the end of your journey on an Access module. And it's also a space for you to talk to other people. And we know that getting together in a small group and being able to share experiences and fill each other in, encourage each other, share tips and ideas is a really, really useful thing to do. Now, for those of you who haven't been to one of our sessions before, you'll see a lot of things going on the screen. You'll see some widgets or interactive voting tools. So we'd like to know where you are in the country, what you're doing, how you're feeling. To click on one of those and to select and input your data, which is all anonymous, all you do is select the one that you'd like to vote on or tell us what you think, and then fill it in. So on a multi-choice question, you just click on the question that fits you most. On a map, you just click on where you are. And on these word clouds, which basically fill up into a lovely collage of words, we need three things. Now, if you can only think of one or two, that's fine, but just put a full stop in there so that your results submit. And when you fill in the details, you'll also see what everyone else has said in the chat. Now, the other thing, the chat can move quite fast and it can be quite buzzy and it can be quite busy. So please engage with that if that's something you would like to do. But if it's all a bit overwhelming, you might just prefer to watch the video, and you can change the interface of the screen to something that suits you. And you can also pin the chat as well. There's a little pin button on the top right-hand side so that you can stop it and scroll down if there's something you'd like to reply to. But as I say, this is your space, it's your opportunity, so please do feel whatever is best. There is absolutely no pressure. But to help you, we've got HJ, and George and Anik will also be on our hot desk today. Hello HJ, how's everyone at home?
Good morning, we're doing well. There's loads of people in the chat. So as you said, we might want to hit that pin button, stop it scrolling through, and we can put it through manually. But yeah, loads of people ready and raring to go. We got Kelvin, he's got his coffee in hand and notebook and pen at the ready. And Leslie is just taking her puppy out for a walk. So maybe she wants to send us a picture of a puppy. I'll tell you how to do that in a sec. We've got lots of people doing YO32, getting ready for their TMA04. And lots of people on YO33. So all the Access modules are well presented here. And there's lots of excitement for the evening session tonight for, I think it's YO32. There's one on that everyone's doing. But yeah, we're all happy and ready. We've got our coffees at hand. So in the chat, as always, anything goes. If there's any thoughts, comments or questions for our guests, we'd love to hear them. And I'm happy to put them to our guests as well. And if there's, you may see this board behind me, there's lots of blank spaces. If there's something you want to send in to us, for example, if there's a great quote or a great study tip, I'd love to hear it and put it on my board. If you want to send a picture of your puppies or kittens or anything else, the view from where you are, just email us studenthub@open.ac.uk or our Twitter. I'll post in the chat as well at Student Hub Live, and I'll give you a few instructions about how to do that. So we're all ready to go here.
Brilliant. And you've mentioned some of the workshops. We had one last night. We've got a range of activities at the Student Hub Live. So even if you're at the end of your Access module, you can still participate in lots of things. These are the broadcast events. So unlike last night's session and tonight's session, which are in Adobe Connect, our online room, this time you'll be able to see the studio and talk to each other. So it's a slightly different interface. But the program's a lot longer. So you'll need to replenish yourself with tea and cakes and biscuits and toilet breaks. This is all recorded, so if you'd like to catch up on any of the sessions, you can do so afterwards. And you can also take notes if you'd like to, but as I say, please do bear in mind your own comfort. But we've got a jam-packed programme. We're going to be covering answering the question, then we've got some top tips on YO31. We've got a session about thinking about evidence, and then we're going to have a break and play a replay video about working with your tutor. Then we've got some top tips on YO33, and then we go to focus on YO32 before ending, as we typically do, with some reflection. So you can see all of the details on the Student Hub Live website about that programme. Now, some of the content here is very specific to particular modules, but there is something for everyone. So do hang around, do talk to other people, even if it is a module that you're not studying yourself. But as I say, take what you want to from today's programme. So we asked you how you were feeling on this very fine morning. Let's see what you had to say. We're good, just getting our Wordle ready, and it's got lots of interesting things there. Chatty, intrigued, relaxed, nervous, hungry, anticipatory, a little bit stressed, glad the TMA is complete, ready to go, calm, excited, a little nervous, sleepy, mildly panicked, damp, a little bit sleepy, anxious. So a real range of emotions here. Interested and excited, tired and relaxed and happy are the key ones that are coming through. So thank you for filling all of that in. And we hope to allay some of your fears. So before we start, let me introduce my guests here. We've got John Butcher, who is the Head of Access, George Curry, who's a Senior Manager, and Actoria, who is a tutor as well as one of our student support team colleagues. John, tell us why we've put today on and a little bit about some of the modules and what we're hoping to get out of this from our side.
Well, Karen, we're really excited about today. It's the first time we've put on a Student Hub Live day like this for Access. And I want to welcome all our students out there. We know YO31, those students thinking about arts and languages, is a really popular module. I'll say something about that in a moment. And YO32, our People, Work and Society module, and our STEM module, YO33. So welcome to all those students. We're particularly interested in doing two things on Access. First of all, we're very mindful that some students starting off in higher education have been out of education previously for a long while. And so sometimes they're lacking a little bit of confidence and are not quite sure how they're going to cope, and indeed how they're going to cope with distance learning. So one of the real purposes of Access is to build up that confidence. And we know from all the surveys that we've done in our students previously, and there have been 24,000 students have taken Access in the past. So this is a really solid programme. We know that people say it really transforms their lives and increases their confidence in study. And the second thing is, it's about preparing students for their undergraduate modules, giving them a taste of higher education in the disciplines they might wish to be interested in. And I have to say right from the start, be open about the subjects you're going to study for your final qualification. Lots of students take Access and they actually change their study route as a result of the experience they've had on Access. So welcome everybody.
Brilliant. Now, there's a lot going on in particular this week. We've already mentioned some of the workshops that we've got. But for some of our J students, those students who may have started September, October time, they'll also be having moving on weeks. And of course, Access, as you say, prepares students for moving on if that's something they want to do.
Yeah, it does. And we've introduced the moving on weeks as a new dimension to the Access programme. So far, they've been really successful. And I think there's two reasons for that. One is students are kind of reaching the end and they want to make the right choice about the qualification they move on to. And often students even can get to the end of Access and still be not quite sure. So the opportunity to sit in on some level 1 tutorials or to hear what level 1 chairs have to say is really important. And I think the other thing is, and I think the moving on week is an aspect of this, is we know that students who do an Access module are significantly more likely to pass their level 1 module. So there's something about the progression from Access to level 1 which is a really good thing.
Now, I'd like to turn to some of our students who may be at the very start of their journey, those starting in February. And one of our widgets that we've asked people about is what they're most worried about. Now, let's see what they had to say, because there's some very interesting things that have come up on that I think you might want to touch on, John. Okay. So, time is one of the key things that's coming up, time management. Yep. But other things here that I think we're all very familiar with, ideas around failing, not getting it right, not understanding it, not getting the marks, personal goals, keeping up, failing, juggling work, being overwhelmed, falling behind. There's also some positive things on here, but again, a lot of this, I mean, as worries might be, seem to relate with things like, you know, again, am I good enough to be able to do this? And this is something we've seen a lot, isn't it?
It is. We're very experienced in this. I'd like to pick up on one of these, and I'd like to bring in George and Victoria after that. I want to pick up on the F word, the failure word, OK? And many of our students we know come onto Access, and through their reflective writing and through the engagement with their tutors, they often talk about how they're carrying with them a sense of failure from their previous education. This can go on for years. This is a really, really serious thing. And I think what we know from Access is in the vast majority of cases, cases, because of the way we've designed the modules, because of the way tutor support is embedded and students develop study skills, and because of the way we assess students, students get a real sense of achievement and can succeed in a way that sometimes transforms their own perceptions of themselves. So I want to really address that point. You may well be, and I feel that's honest, carrying that sense of failure with you. Persist with access and you'll be able to throw that off, and that's really important. Let's bring in George and Victoria.
Yeah. George.
So one of the things I noticed on that word cloud was a sense of feeling overwhelmed and not being able to fit it in. Now, we appreciate that being an Open University student is just one part of the lives of all of our students. Many other responsibilities, work, children, etc., etc. So what I'd urge students to do is at the start of every week, there's an activity which gets them to think about really practically about what time they've got in the coming week and when they can study. And I think trying to be realistic at that point and just carving out half an hour here, 40 minutes there makes the difference. So it's about a practical look at the shape of your week, knowing that things change, children are ill, work has requirements that you didn't know you were going to have at the start of the week, but really thinking practically about when you're going to study, where you're going to study, and how you're going to get it done. And I think that will kind of break it down, so it doesn't just look like this massive thing that you need to do. It's just little bits and pieces just in the week ahead.
And of course, remembering it's not important to get it right or be great at time management right at the start.
Absolutely.
It's about wriggling it round and seeing how it all fits.
Yeah.
Trying something different. Maybe that works, maybe it doesn't. Maybe you can do something else. And again, share those tips in the chat, because I bet you found very innovative ways of being able to squeeze that extra half an hour into studying. And Victoria, I'd like to talk about some of the positive things as well, because in addition to asking students what they were most worried about, we asked them about why they were studying. And there's some lovely positive things here that I think when we're worried can be so important to bring to mind. So let's see what you said. Confidence, challenge, career, further study to better myself, improve CV, self-improvement, career options. A career is coming up in a phenomenal way here. To show my daughter, this is something that's so important for people, setting a positive example. And even if you're studying in the house with children around you, it's great to do that. More things coming up here. Joy, excellent. Progress, grandchildren, to help people. So there's lots and lots of motivations here that are really important, some of which are about yourself, some of which are about showing your family you can do something, and some of which are showing other people how you can help, perhaps because of something you've been through yourself.
Yeah, no, indeed. I mean, we've got lots of students studying for a variety of reasons, but, you know, essentially it's important to remember that this is for you. It's probably going to be a longish journey. You know, this is kind of the first step in something that could take quite a few years. And it's important to try and enjoy it, you know, and to try and think, you don't have to be great right now, you know, you can kind of work towards greatness. And there will be peaks and troughs, you know, there will be things that you get on with during your journey, things that you don't. And that doesn't mean that you can't do it. It just means that the next good thing is just around the corner.
Brilliant. Now, we've had some level of where people are at, but I'd like to talk about one thing, which is this whole idea about not failing. And we've done some research and we found that the best way to not fail, particularly with assessment, is to answer the question that is set instead of the one you would prefer it to be, which is a very common mistake I think we have all made at various moments in time, and indeed is a very, very, very challenging thing. So our first session is really grappling with that issue. Now, John, you've got some ideas about how we can help students to really think about breaking this question down.
Yeah, and I don't take this lightly. Students tell us that assessment is the most stressful thing they do in higher education, and particularly in our access modules when perhaps students haven't engaged in this way for quite a few years. So I think let's get the glaringly obvious stuff out of the way first. One, read the question, read all the question. There might be some bits that come after, or turn the page or flick the screen or whatever, so make sure you've got that. And I think crucially is make sure you've understood what the question is asking you to do. And in a moment, we're going to do a bit of a live exercise on looking at some of the key words in a question and how, if you can really understand what they mean, it will help structure your answer. And this could be in a kind of essay form or a report or even in a piece of reflective writing, and you're much more likely then to succeed and do well. And the last thing I want to say is, if you're not sure what the question is asking you, get on the phone to your tutor. Your tutor will help mediate and facilitate that don't feel you're just on your own.
Absolutely. OK, a quick game sounds like a lot of fun. George, what have you got?
OK, so I have here these prepared words on these laminated, beautiful colours. And I'm going to hold them up, and John and Victoria are going to do whatever it says on the word, but in terms of making a cup of tea.
Yeah.
Oh, you wanted to say something about
to apply
tea.
these words to making a cup of tea.
We're basing this as a very famous essay by the great George Orwell that was published in 1946 on how to make the perfect cup of tea.
Right.
And we're just going to use that as a little kind of idea, and we're going to try and see how some of these key words would differentiate how we might answer that question.
OK, what's the first word?
Forgive me if people don't like tea. There's going to be a lot of
Other drinks
tea
are
now.
available,
Other drinks
yes.
are available.
Right, we're going to go with describe.
Describe. So, all right, first of all, that would say to me, that suggests to me unpicking a series of steps. So it may well be going right back. Orwell would have said, warm the pot first. OK, so, and then following from that would be a whole series of steps which would be entirely descriptive, which means we are not kind of necessarily evaluating how one step is better than another, but it's a bit like a piece of observation. You're observing the steps that one would do to get there.
Brilliant.
OK, analyse.
OK, analyse. I'm going to bring in Victoria for the difficult ones, obviously.
Typical.
Now, analyse is one of those higher education words, isn't it? And we get it a lot, and we certainly expect the skills of analysis as we go through our higher education journey. But what we're really looking for with analysis is unpicking what is going on when you are making that cup of tea. And there might be a sense of judgment there about how effectively someone did it. So it's a higher order question, I think, than simply describing.
Right. Excellent.
I never warm the pot, which is why my tea always goes cold.
OK. So analytically, Victoria's tea making might not be great, but mine might be better. But
What we could do with that is compare.
So already there we've compared one route into tea making with another. The classic one, of course, is comparing the benefits of a cup of tea with the benefits of a cup of coffee, or the benefits of a different sort of tea. So I think there you're looking really for a judgment as to whether one is more tasty, more refreshing, more stimulating, that kind of thing, really.
So it's about identifying the parameters of the comparison and then lining them up.
I think it is, and almost having, in your mind, having two columns, the plus side for tea versus the plus side for coffee or something like that.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
Excellent.
And then justify.
OK, well, Orwell would have loved this. So this is the kind of, why on earth is tea important? OK, and justify the choice of a cup of tea, because obviously, I say obviously because in my head, you cannot start the day with a cup of coffee. You have to start the day with a cup of tea. But I know many people who would equally justify, I would start the day with a cup of coffee because. And then you're setting up then a whole series of rational reasons as to why one is the right way to go. What do you think of justifying, Victoria? Is it?
Absolutely, yeah. You're saying why what you've chosen is the right answer, or is more convincing, maybe.
And in that, what you might need is some evidence.
Well, it's funny you say that, isn't it? Because I think we're going to be touching upon evidence later.
We are.
We'll always be touching on evidence.
But certainly, yes. But that's an important point. So justify, it shouldn't be just my whim, my kind of personal taste or something. It should be with a reason behind it. And the reason, as George mentions, is going to be some evidence.
Now, before we go through these, I just want to clarify for people, because the evidence is central in whichever aspect we're looking at here.
Yes,
there always
yes.
needs to be something that we're
Yes.
hanging our hat on. But, John, what you're saying is the extent to which opinion and argument come into each of these questions vary,
Yes.
depending on what you're doing. So in a descriptive aspect, you're talking, as you said, through the cups of tea, or the stages of making a cup of tea, whereas something like justify, there's more of an argument coming through. But, again, you're using evidence in a similar sort of way, as in that has to be the basis of what you're talking about.
Yes, and I think with a word like justify and with a word like analyse, you might be picking out the most important piece of evidence. So you're weighting something as to be more persuasive for the reader.
So some of the things that might appear in a descriptive account would not appear in a justify account, because you're
Definitely.
focusing again on the
The
importance.
descriptive account will be a very simple, and the simpler you can make it, the better, observation of what has gone on in the tea making.
Brilliant. We've got time for a couple more, but we'll have to be quick.
OK, well, let's go summarise.
So there we are. We almost summarised the position there, didn't we? So Orwell may well have had his 10 steps for making a cup of tea, and at the end he would have a little paragraph which would summarise the key points he has made so that the reader, the tutor, will absolutely understand that you've understood what the key points are. So summary is very important.
And again, about the important things, not necessarily just making everything shorter.
No, and don't, and yes, and exactly. So you're pulling out the key points in the tea making that you want your tutor to have understood that you've got.
Perfect. Excellent.
Right, and just we've had compare.
Oh, we have had contrast.
Often
Yes.
coupled together.
Exactly.
There's often, that's a very good point. There is often a compare and contrast question. Now, that's really interesting, I think, because comparing, you might be looking at similarities in the benefits of a cup of tea and a cup of coffee. You know, they're both hopefully hot, they're both kind of brown, they're both kind of might have milk with them, all that kind of silly stuff, really. But the contrast, and I think tea drinkers and coffee drinkers would agree on this, is perhaps the impact of having drunk a cup of tea or a cup of coffee. You know, more caffeine in one. Perhaps one is more of a social drink and one's more of an individual drink. I don't know really, but look out for those compare and contrast questions because they again are an example of those kind of higher academic skills really, but you're not describing there. You're pulling important things out. On the one hand, there's this. On the other hand, there's that.
Brilliant. George, I think we've only got time for one more. Can you
Right.
choose your
I
favourite?
will choose a good one. Right, I'm going to go with examine.
Oh man, that's a
examine.
difficult one.
Anecdote.
I think this could be easily confused with describe,
Yeah,
but it's a much closer microscopic look, I feel, with examine. You're probably more likely to find this maybe in our YO33 STEM module.
I think with our science colleagues there, they like to examine things, don't they? And I think that forensic examination, almost looking through a microscope at the absolute detail of the evidence you're going to be using and pulling that out. So almost at the other extreme of simply describe, isn't it, really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Brilliant. We've got a question I want to bring, and then finally to close, because we are out of time, I'm going to ask you, which you can think about, what makes the difference between a good answer and a great answer? So one sentence to end on that. But HJ, what's your question?
It was just one very quick from the chat. A lot of us are looking at discuss with our EMA, so we just wanted to briefly touch on how would that apply to our example.
Okay, discuss for me could imply a compare and contrast. It could imply a kind of justification type question. So I think there you're certainly looking at evidence and you're certainly looking at coming to an informed opinion, but not just kind of your own personal taste again, coming to an informed opinion on the basis of the way you're kind of ranking the evidence. So this seems to me a very important point that would lead me to the view that is the kind
So it's
of
almost
thing.
like listening to the different voices on the subject.
I think it is, and I think that is, in a sense, the academic skill. So in higher education, usually, unless we're dealing with maths, there's no right answer. It's absolutely about the extent to which you bring your intelligence and your perception to a question and weight things in a different way. So you can actually convince a tutor, you can, even if it might be not what they were thinking themselves, you can marshal the argument, marshal the evidence, marshal the facts to persuade them. And that's a really higher order skill, and you'll get a very good mark for that.
Well,
Brilliant.
linking on to what you asked earlier about what makes a great answer, I was going to talk about the notion of linking ideas, so that an essay or a report isn't just kind of a series of thoughts that are kind of stated one after the other, but it's about creating that narrative and linking the ideas together that I think makes the difference.
What you want is your tutor to say that was an elegant and coherent argument. And I think a word we haven't introduced that I think that the best answers will have is that idea of synthesis. So again, a bit of an academic word there, but the idea of bringing together and marshalling your thoughts together in a very convincing summary. And again, then your tutor will give you a big tick because they will be pleased at that.
So synthesise. And Victoria, what's your advice?
My advice would be proofread. So you've answered the question, you've linked your paragraphs together. just go back through, make sure there's no extraneous little half sentences that have dropped in there that don't really help you answer. Maybe you've brought in a bit of a tangent. Maybe there's a bit of opinion snuck in that you don't really have the evidence for. So either find the evidence or take it out.
And in doing that, check your word count.
Yeah.
What tutors get very, very unhappy if people overwrite or underwrite. All questions are designed to be answered in a certain number of words.
In a certain level of detail. Excellent. Well, thank you all so much. And we've got plenty of time to talk about other things throughout the day. And in fact, you'll all be back in various ways, shape, or form. So don't worry if we haven't answered your question. But Debbie did ask about whether there's a list of words. Debbie, there is one, and I'll find that. There is a section on Student Home called the Help Centre. And they there have a really handy booklet about process words in your TMA. But I'll find it and we'll put it on all of the forums. So whether you're a J or B student, we'll make sure that we put that link up for you, because there is a list of words and there are common conventions to do that, although it's great fun talking about them, particularly in terms of tea, although I hear everyone says that only tea and biscuits go together. So, John, George, Anak, thank you so much. That's been a great session, and as I say, there's plenty more. But before we come back to talk about something else, we're going to show you some student videos. We asked students to send in some little videos, and we're going to hear from Gina, Sue and John. And then we're going to show you a little bit about the campus, which is where we're broadcasting from today, so that you can see where we are at the Open University here in Milton Keynes. Then we'll be back to talk about top tips on Y031. So join me after 5 minutes for the next session.